Hi, I'm Brett. In this session, we're going to walk through what we call the translation of strategy into action through OKRs. And this is just a quick overview of how OKRs help leaders and executives accurately deliver their strategy throughout the organization. So the body of knowledge that we're based on today is all about objectives. And back in 1954, Peter Drucker wrote a book and explained about MBOs that many of us were exposed to in business school. That concept was modified by Doctors Kaplan and Norton in the 90s in a concept called the balanced scorecard. And I happen to be involved in that research at Harvard and writing the first book. And at that point in time, we had maybe monthly financials, and if you're lucky, you could get customer information, say, once a year. From there, the thought process continued to evolve through companies like Intel, and eventually John Doerr wrote a book a couple of years ago about OKRs. And they're kind of the same concept, but suited for the time that each of these bodies were developed. So if we think of the evolution from 1954, we now have way more data, just the abundance of data, and the data is more frequent. Before, remember I said in the 90s we could get maybe annual customer data? We now have it moment to moment, near real time. We also have way better management practices. You go down to the bookstore and there are thousands of books that talk about every single aspect of managing business. And therefore, we've got way better business acumen inside the businesses. We have a much faster pace of business. Back in the 90s, we used to write 5-year plans for our clients. I can't imagine doing that now. The uncertainty that we used to have out 5 years, we now have out 1 year. So our old 5-year plan is now our 1-year plan. That means our old 1-year plan is now the 1-quarter plan. So the pace of business is much faster. And we combine these things to have a way better workforce skill set and competencies around management. So that's the evolution of the underlying body of knowledge. The issue around strategy is this, that the decay rate of understanding an organization's strategic priorities is ginormous. Now, there's many different studies on it. The one I like best is by Donald and Charles Saul. They've done a great job of getting really hard data. And if we take a look at the levels in the organization, and we kind of score the percentage of those who can tell us that organization's current strategic priorities. Top team, you'd hope it'd be much higher, but it's only 51%. But it just falls right off a cliff. Senior executives 22, middle management 18. By the time you get to frontline managers, it's 13. The reason this is scary is it means that even the people that help develop the strategy cannot articulate it very well. And of course, it means that the strategy is paper thin, that as soon as I go down one level, we've already lost focus. Like the other, the glass being half empty side of the story would look like this. It would mean that if I ask my senior executive whether I should do this or that, there's a 78% chance they'd get the answer wrong. There's a 78% chance they don't know what the strategy is and therefore can't answer whether we should be getting better share of wallet from existing customers or penetrating new markets. And by the time we get down to the front line, there's a 13% chance that they understand the strategy or an 87% chance that they don't. And that not only impedes your ability to get the strategy into the organization, it dampens the agility of the organization, because if you changed the strategy mid-year or mid-quarter, it doesn't permeate down the organization. So what ends up happening is, even if you do an awesome job communicating at the beginning of the year and you fine-tune the strategy during the year, at the end of the year, there's an 87% chance the organization's still moving against that original strategy that you laid down, not the one that you've evolved during the year. And with the pace of business, man, if you're not able to make your strategy executed in an agile format, the competition wins. Now, this is seen by the employees too. So if we take a look at some of the research we've done on just employees, we ask them a question, for example, do employees understand your strategy and direction? And so what we discovered is, when we asked the question, do you, what we found is, in terms of those that do not, 86% do not understand the company strategy. The disadvantage of that means that moment to moment, if they choose, do I, resolve this bug or deal with this enhancement, they don't know how to make that decision. They have to wait for their boss to tell them. Then we ask them, does this help you feel engaged or disengaged? And what we found is that the vast majority of employees, 87%, say they're not engaged. Why is that? Because they don't understand their purpose and they don't feel connected to what the organization does. Then the final question that we think is interesting is, do you think that you're getting appropriate feedback? So for the performance that you contribute, is there a relationship between the performance you contribute and the recognition by the organization? And of course, that's also significantly diluted, because if you don't know what you're supposed to do, it's hard to get rewarded for it. And in this case, they said there's 57% don't feel that the performance management system is actually related to the work that they do. So the strategy execution thing gets broken because the strategy is not communicated down the organization, and that people inside the organization don't feel connected with it and feel that their work contributes to it. So that's the problem. The solution set, you've seen this, pyramid slide a gazillion times before. Somehow or the other, we have to take that organization's mission and vision and break that down to, if what I need to do this year to achieve those goals. And we now need to take those annual goals and break those down to what do I need to do this quarter. And once I understand what I need to do this quarter, what are the key results? What would I have more of or less of as I move towards that objective? So as measured by. And then the things that drive those key results are the day-to-day activities. So that's a logical cascade. You've seen this a bunch of times before. An important attribute to think about is that mission vision is held by you, the executive team, and the CEO, and it's long-term. It's out for the next 5 or 10 years. And we break that down to these annual strategic goals, which are basically for this year, but if they're developed right, they may be replicated for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. For example, McDonald's has always been fast food, so that those objectives transcend time, but there's others that have come and gone. So they've evolved to be more family restaurant, now they've evolved towards a cafe. So those are new objectives that have come in. We then take that annual objective and break it down to what we're doing this quarter, and from there, what we're doing today. So metaphorically, that long term, that's what the executive owns. This year, that's what the VPs own. This quarter, that's what the people that report to those VPs own. And of course, today and this week, that's what frontline workers own. In other words, as you go down this pyramid, the timelines get shorter and shorter, and the ownership moves down the organization chart. So as we develop our strategy model, historically, we focused on what we need at the leadership team and the VPs. And all we're doing with OKRs is moving that focus down one more notch to the quarterly work. And so this tends to be focused on ensuring that middle management and below understand this strategy and how they work towards it. So, and then the wording's not clever. OKR, objective and key results, is just talking about that quarterly drumbeat. The benefit of this, of course, is now if you have a change in strategy, I can quickly replicate it down. For some of our clients, if the strategy gets changed on Monday, the VPs meet on Tuesday, their direct reports on Wednesday, the people to them Thursday, and then by Friday, I can roll it back up. Not only that, I can, on an ongoing basis, have this feedback from the organization about how we're moving against those goals. So I no longer need to wait for a QBR or an annual review. I can actually take a look at it any month, any week, any day. In fact, inside the organization, we see that different elements of the organization have different drum beats. Think of the gears in your watch. So some of those gears tick over once a second. Think of that as your daily stand-up meeting that you might have in sales or development. Some once a week, the bigger gears in your watch. Some once a month. What we agree is once a quarter we synchronize. Now in truth, for most of our clients, you're synchronizing those gears once a month. Once a month, we should have a wave of meetings across the organization at which we all are updated on how we're performing. So that's the concept of OKRs. There's some other things that fit inside of this concept as well. So, for example, think of any team, a hockey team, football team, an orchestra, playing a board game. In all those areas, you can see what all the other teammates are doing. And that's super important because, being Canadian, I think about it as hockey. If I'm playing forwards, but I see my defense is weak, I better come back and back check to cover for them. How do we do that in the organization? How do we know that sales is having a problem, so marketing needs to come back and help out? Or operations is having an issue and we need to adjust our activities accordingly? We don't have that visibility, and if we do, it's only at the top of the house. What if everyone could see that? What if someone in the shipping door could see operations is having a problem and figure out how they could help close that gap, however they might? So the visibility of these objectives across the organization is super important. Not only does it allow the individuals to do their jobs better, but it gives you way better engagement and way higher internal promotion opportunities, because these people will rise to the surface. Those that have that cross-functional visibility and interest are those that you would love to promote and move up the leadership chain. So, how do we make this happen? Well, there's a series of meetings that allow us to have that strategic conversation on an ongoing basis. So for the sake of argument, we kind of see there to be three types of meetings: tactical, operational, and strategic. And most of these exist in your organization. We're going to take what you do and power them with OKRs so they become way more potent. So on the tactical level, think of a sales team, say, having a weekly meeting. In that weekly meeting, we spend most of our time talking about performance and taking action. That happens every week. You probably have these meetings already. Once a month, we get together and we spend less time talking about performance and action to try to understand the implications of what's going on. What are the systemic things we're seeing? And how can we adjust our teams? I'm not going to change salaries or rewards or marketing campaigns or anything, but within the structures I have and the freedom I have, what can I tweak to have a better result next month? Now, those meetings probably already exist. The meeting that's typically new, or at least new on a quarterly basis, is one where we take the existing performance and the existing strategy and we stop working in the business and we work on the business. In that meeting, we spend less time talking about performance, less time talking about the implications, to create a big chunk of time to talk about the strategic issues, our strategic objectives, right? So maybe we had an objective that said we're going to get better share of wallet. And we find after first quarter that's not working for us and we want to throttle back to penetrate new markets. So I'm going to change that strategy or priorities and run the next quarter with that new model. So what I've been able to do is deploy a strategy inside of the year. In fact, the process repeats. So next quarter, we tweak it again and again and again. And what ends up happening is this organization has 4 learning cycles where you used to have 1. And because of the structure of OKRs, it's immediately cascaded down to the bottom of the organization, literally the next day or the next week. And everyone is now moving towards that new direction. In fact, even if an event happens in the middle of a quarter, a competitor drops out and you want to grab that share, all of a sudden you can get together and have this meeting and go, you know what, we're no longer going for penetrating new markets. We're going to go back for share of wallet. In the North American market, we've got a space, all hands on deck, man. We're going to chase that down. Next day, everyone's objectives and rewards and focus are aligned to that new goal. That's what we call applying Agile to management practices. It allows us to absolutely translate strategy into action at the speed and pace of business. So if we think of what OKRs do, they allow us to also plan differently. So traditionally, if I'm going to put down my 2020 plan, I'm going to take what I did last year and forecast, roll it forward. So historically, I had 10 million sales. I want 15. I forecast. But the interesting thing is we can now backcast. We can say, what my BHAG is, what I want to be in 2025, and backcast. What do I need to do today in order to be ready for that future? So the example that John Doerr uses in his book, Measure What Matters, is putting man on the moon. Well, to put man on the moon by the end of the decade, there's a bunch of stuff I had to do at the beginning of the decade. I had to figure out how to build a landing pad on the moon. I kept Cape Canaveral so I could take off again. I had to figure out how to get a spacesuit that people could walk around in. And I had to figure out how to communicate with a capsule when America was on the other side of the Earth. Simple things, but if I didn't solve them at the beginning of the decade, I'd never hit my goal at the end of the decade. So how is it we also backcast and include that in our plans? And so OKRs give us that opportunity. As you take a look at your strategy is not only about executing what you need to do next year, but what do I need to do next decade, and then roll back what I now need to do this year to make that happen. Now, building an OKR system is not complicated. You have all the building blocks, and I'll walk you through each step. But basically, what we need to do is grab your strategy, cascade it down to the department level or the next level down, link it to your existing data, put it in some tool, and then begin using it. So what's that look like? Well, step one is typically done with a leadership team, and we're going to build. We typically use strategy maps. What are your objectives and how important they are, and how they lead to success? So in this way, everyone in the organization gets it. I understand how the work I do leads to success and what its current priorities are. Now, as leadership goes through the quarter, I can change these objectives and I can change these priorities. But that's a starting point. And I can link those to our existing budgets. So we typically have the corporate level objectives and key results done by the end of the first day. Day two, let's get a cross-functional team in the room. And what we're going to do is we're going to take those objectives on the left and across the top, your core processes. And with those core processes, we're going to score the impact of each process on each objective. And these are just conditionally formatted, right? 4 times 5, 20, light or dark gray, 5 times 20, 100, dark gray. Everywhere where there's a black square, that's a critical performance node. I've literally, by day 2, I've identified where my critical performance nodes are. For the work that we're doing here, that's where I need to build my OKRs. So I've accurately translated corporate strategy into what each department does, and I can also figure out what are the cross-functional teams I need to make that happen. So you can do other stuff with this, like link it to role clarity and organization design, but for us, that tells us where to write those objectives and key results. So then what we need to do is understand what we call an objective breakdown. How do I take those black squares, those objectives, and break it down to the things I need to do to make that happen? And we break those down until we get to a consistent level of magnitude across the organization. From there, we pay literally show and tell. Each department shows the rest of the organization what they do and what support they need from other departments. One of our clients calls that the give and gets. We also get to see what the other departments are doing and make sure that we contribute where we should. And then the last thing, we just attach key results on. What data do we currently have that we'd have more of or less of as those objectives occurred? So literally by day 3, we've built that whole structure of objectives and key results. Day 4, we put it into a system of record. The issue is that this is a complicated system, like your organizations are complicated, and we're trying to put it into one single view of the truth. And so we can now begin to capture that. And as we put in those OKRs, we capture the 7 dimensions of data. So for each objective, I can not only see what does it link to in this strategy, but what product group is it with, what region is it with, what process is it with, who owns it, and so forth. So that as you do your analysis, I can rotate that OKRs and look at that data cube from the perspective you want. So then I can begin setting up dashboards. I can go, how am I doing on my objectives and my direct reports? How are they doing who report up to me? I can build a dashboard for my team. So now we have a way to conduct those daily or weekly performance meetings. I can begin to take a look at the overall organization and see how we're doing against our top level objectives. And then of course I can drill down through, by organization chart or by strategic objective and filter that by region, whatever my curiosity is. So what we're trying to do is make this performance data available to everyone all the time. Now, each department, as I said before, has a different drumbeat, but I need to have real-time access to this. I can't wait till my weekend performance review. I can't wait till my month end or court my QBR. How can I manage the business at the pace of business change? All that's great, but metaphorically, this is a bit like giving you a better set of golf clubs. So by Thursday, man, you got an awesome set of golf clubs. Friday, we got to teach you how to use this to run the business better. How do I have my CFOs in conversations about performance to make sure that people are focusing on the right things, we're holding hands and supporting each other in the places that we need to? So literally, for most organizations, in 5 days, you're up and running. Now, it's a bit like riding a bike. The next 3 quarters or 9 months, you're going to be evolving this. Your measures are going to get better. The ownership's going to get better. The conversations are getting better. But it's one of these things that sitting in a boardroom writing flip charts does not make it any better. It's about turning it on and getting that experience in the organization. And it is about go big or go home. We need to get enough of the business covered by this first pilot that everyone in the organization can see it and relate to it, and that we can immediately see that better performance. So that's quickly what that journey looks like. So hopefully by now you can see that actually bringing OKRs into your business is pretty straightforward. This stuff already exists. We're just harvesting the hard work you've done in putting together your plans and budgets and organization structures and put them into a common framework that allows us to see across all departments simultaneously. So what are the benefits that we see from this? Well, many of the things that we talked about at the beginning get cured, but here's what we know. We know that fast, solid decisions are a requisite for fast, good results. And if you're not able to make fast, good decisions, guess what? You're not going to have those results. How do we get those? Every team needs a couple of things. Clarity on the results that they're trying to achieve. Contextual data on results to data and real live about what they're doing and what those risks are. And fast follow through on all performance issues so that as soon as an issue occurs, we're on it. It doesn't get out of control. And then finally, activities which are focused on results. And when we do this weekly focus on OKR, we've observed across our 3,000 implementations or so, it improves results by about 20%, which is incredible because this is not increasing headcount. This is about getting the sand out of the system, allowing people to focus on the things that count. Now, to set your OKRs, it does take a chunk of time, but if you think about it, you've got every employee, people have about 530 hours per quarter of working time to contribute to the success of your business. Setting up your OKs will take them about 5 hours a quarter. So is that a great investment? It takes about 5 hours to get back 525 hours of productivity. I think we take that every day. And here's what we know. We know that employees that use OKRs are more productive and they see the benefit themselves. So they're self-assuring and intrinsically motivated to keep driving the business forwards. So I hope this has been interesting to you. This is a conversation about how we've been able to translate strategy into action through OKRs in almost every organization inside of a week. Some it takes a fortnight, but this is not a long, painful process because we have what we need already. We just have to get it in place.